Hey there, welcome back to Launch Your Private Podcast. This episode is part of our special Roundup series, where we're exploring 5 powerful ways businesses are using private podcasts to nurture, engage, and convert. Each Roundup features a few past guests sharing their real-world experience around one theme. I asked each of them the same set of questions, and you'll hear their answers back to back, so you can catch different perspectives quickly without a ton of backstory. And we hosted this all over Voxer, completely async, and was able to use Hello Audio's Dolby connection in order to make it sound nice and clean. So today's episode focus, how to grow your email list with private podcasts. And not just grow your list, but build one filled with highly engaged, ready-to-buy subscribers. You're going to hear from Brittany Herzberg, Amanda Karlstad, Andrea Jones, and Natalie Kusa, all experts who've launched smart, creative, and seriously effective audio lead magnets. They'll each kick off by introducing themselves and sharing what their private podcast lead magnet is all about. If you want to dive deeper into any of their work or their case study, we've linked to their full solo episodes for you in the show notes. All right, let's dive in.
My name is Brittany Herzberg, and I believe your content should be working harder than you do. As an SEO strategist, I help your podcast, blog, and website rank on Google so clients find you without you burning out from social media. I've used private podcasts in so many ways because I found that they support this whole work smarter, not harder strategy, which I totally love. With a previous launch, I created a private podcast that was basically a mini training to pique curiosity and set people up nicely to join the program that I was launching at the time. Right now, I'm using a private podcast to support a different launch, but still it's for a program launch. I have already an existing private podcast that's been my lead magnet for a few months now. And for this upcoming launch, I'm recording a brand new bonus series of 4 episodes that's going to address specific things like the core thoughts and doubts and concerns and questions that people need to work through before joining my SEO mentorship program.
My name is Amanda Karlstad, and I am a master business coach, and I help my clients, my coaching clients, scale to multi-figures and beyond. And my audio lead magnet is a private podcast series that I developed actually now a couple of years ago. It's a 3-part series that is really all about scaling and the 3 key shifts to doing that. And I've been running that lead magnet now over the past several years. That has been really, really great for my business, has brought in amazing clients into my mastermind programs. And I'm currently in the process of creating a brand new private podcast series, which should be done very, very soon. So I'm super excited about that.
Hi, my name is Andrea Jones. I am a mindful marketing strategist, formerly a social media strategist. I help online business owners create simpler, smarter business solutions, especially for those people who are very busy. My latest private podcast is actually a challenge that I ran in my membership, the Mindful Marketing Lab, called the Social Media Reset Challenge. It is one that we've been running every single year in December. So after 3 years of data from my members talking about how impactful it was for them, I turned it into a brand new private podcast. I also have a set of meditations that go along with this. So the private podcast idea made the most sense for this particular product. In the past, I still have my Raise Your Rates private podcast, which leads to the pro level of the membership. So this latest private podcast leads to the main level of the membership. Because I saw so much success with the Raise Your Rates podcast, I knew that I wanted to do more.
I'm Natalie. I'm a podcast guesting and positioning strategist for coaches and service providers and founders who don't want to spend their life on social media. Typically, my clients are really well known in their corner of the internet, and they come to me when they want help to be known, booked, and positioned as the only choice with brand new audiences. And we do that through podcast guest campaigns. I use private podcasts in my lead gen. They're really enjoyable for people to listen to. They build trust quickly. And I typically grow my audience by speaking on podcasts. So when people already love speaking on podcasts, of course, they're going to love opting in to more audio. It's a way of consuming that they already love. And then what I see is that people who discover me from a podcast they trust and then opt into my private podcast, they sign up to work with me 3 times more quickly than people who find me from social media.
Now that you know a little bit about each guest and the private podcast they've created, let's dive into how they decide what content to include to make sure it drives opt-ins.
Oof, it can be so tricky knowing what to include. Lucky for me, strategy is one of my favorite things. In order to showcase my service effectively, I like to let people know a few things. One is what to expect. So, what's the process like for the service or the program? How long is this going to go? What do I need to do beforehand? That type of thing. I find that it really helps. Well, personally, I like knowing all of that stuff before I commit to anything. But it also helps someone just to feel reassured with what it is that they're signing up for. Because, of course, money and time, those are 2 huge objections that people pretty much always have, no matter what the thing is. The second thing is, what have others said? There's literally nothing better than testimonials because people want to hear from other people what it was like to work with you. There's you saying something about what to expect and all of that good stuff, but people want to hear from other people. It just hits different, you know?
When I created my private series, and even in the process of creating the current series that I'm about to launch here very soon, I really think about of course, my ideal client and really think about the things that they're thinking about and really get in tune with really just kind of where their mindset is at and really make sure that I'm clear on their biggest challenges. And so this is kind of goes for all of the content that I create, but I'm always looking at observations that I have kind of across the board. I look at things that are coming up as I'm working with clients and really just kind of being in it with them and really being clear on what it is that they're thinking, what they're feeling, what that's creating for them and being very direct about that. And I think that has worked really well because I have so many clients that come to me that really resonate with my content and with the conversations that I bring. I think a big key here, I think this is just a golden rule for any type of marketing content, but really making sure that you're speaking directly exactly to what those thoughts are, what those challenges are that they're experiencing and what that is creating for them.
When I think about my private podcasts and what to include in them, my ultimate goal is to use what I like to call the Costco sample strategy. So when you go to Costco or any big box store that is similar, Sam's Club, etc., they oftentimes have people out giving samples. And the idea is that before you buy the ginormous bulk version of whatever it is, cheese, you try a little piece. Usually that little piece is served alongside with whatever you would go with it. So crackers or whatever, accoutrement, whatever would go with that piece of cheese, right? And so when I think about my private podcast, I try to give an accurate representation of what it's like to work with me because I feel like there are so many people, especially in the space that I'm in marketing. There are so many people who talk about marketing. There are so many people who talk about different areas of marketing. And the way that I talk about it, I believe, is a little bit different. So even though I come from a social media background, I've been talking about that for 10 years. In the past year, I've really honed in on what my people come to me most for, which is to use social media mindfully and to use it as a piece of the entire marketing ecosystem, not really just focusing in on social media, but having it integrated in marketing as a whole. And so with the private podcast, my ultimate goal is to show not only my philosophies, my beliefs about social media, to share my analogies like my Costco sample analogy, to give a sense of what I'm like to work with. So inside my program, I have private podcasts. So, if right off the bat, that's not a way you want to learn, then that may not be for you. But also some of my idiosyncrasies. So I don't know. I feel like I talk a little bit differently. I have a little bit more casual approach to it. I'm not formally trained in marketing. In fact, my degree is in English literature. I have 2 degrees in English literature and 1 in theater. So not really what I was professionally trained on, and I've been doing this for 11 years on my own business. And prior to that, when I worked in corporate and hospitality, I was also in marketing. My approach is very much people-centered and it's very intimate. And so I love the way that private podcasts can really amplify that. Not only the way that I teach, but the way that my people want to learn. And so it really highlights that and gives them a way to do it.
Profitable Podcast Guest, which is my opt-in private podcast, it speaks to my ideal client identities to help them experience some of the transformation that they can experience in our work together. So often our people, they don't need more information, they don't want more teaching, they don't want the how-to, they don't want the step-by-step. The results that they want to create, they're on the other side of an identity shift. So for my people, we're talking about things like going from being the hidden gem, well known among your people, but hidden gem in a bigger sense, to the really obvious go-to name. Or going from being a service provider who provides a brilliant service, but is one of many people doing the thing that you do, to going to somebody with, or becoming somebody with powerful personal brand who gets paid for strategic thinking. That's how you become the only choice. And they're the kinds of identity shifts that I've found really engage people when we dive deeper in them in a private podcast.
All right, so now we know how they design their audio lead magnets and the thought process that goes behind that. But how do they actually get people to sign up? Let's talk marketing tactics.
The biggest thing is that you just need to keep promoting the private podcast. I know it's so simple, but trust me, it just needs to happen. Post about it to your Instagram feed and in your stories, and do it more than you feel comfortable doing, because not everyone sees it and not everyone is able to click over and subscribe immediately when they see your first post about it, whether it's a feed post or a story. Life is happening. And if you think about your own even social media use and behavior, you know that you're usually doing it in the middle of other stuff, in between other things, as a filler. Just know that. Just because you didn't have a huge sign up response the first time, don't let that discourage you. Just keep sharing it. A few other ideas: you could include a link to the private podcast in your emails. You could either hyperlink to it or include a button or something in the main body of the email, or you could add it as a resource or a link to check out in the PS, almost like a website footer. Another thing you could do is create blog posts about the show and include a link to sign up for your private podcast as the call to action. So you could dream up an entire blog post. Maybe you dive really deep on one of the things that you talk about in the private podcast. And then instead of spilling everything, you give them a button so they can get the rest of the tea over there. And if you have a public podcast and it makes sense to do this, you could promote the private podcast there as well. You could either briefly mention it during the episodes or create an ad to help give it even more exposure. But whatever you do, just keep sharing about your private podcast.
I definitely think that there's a huge opportunity with an audio lead magnet if you are leveraging paid ads. That is something that I have done over time. It's something with my new lead magnet that I'm as well will be running cold traffic too. So I definitely think that it's a great opt-in to run paid ads too, if you are running paid ads or if you desire to run paid ads. The other thing that I would say is I have also kept an organic funnel. I would also say, in addition to paid ads, some things that I've done that have worked really well, obviously linking it to all of my social media accounts. Whenever somebody lands on Instagram or is on my Instagram, making it very clear front and center and really directing traffic to the private series.
I have learned over the years that actually calling it a private podcast is confusing to a lot of people. And I will say my people, they're very smart. They have a lot happening, but the word private podcast doesn't really work for them. So I have tested it out over the years, especially to a cold audience, someone who, is not familiar to me. Usually this is in paid advertising, or if I'm borrowing an audience, like I'm on a podcast or I'm speaking, I don't tend to call this a private podcast. In fact, if you go to my website right now, I call it the Social Media Reset Challenge. Okay. So I name the product with the outcome, in this case, resetting your beliefs around social media and having it work for you instead of against you, right? So social media reset, challenge. But when you get in, immediately you're in the private podcast. So that's how you get access to all of the material. And the private podcast for me is just the mode of transportation.
Private podcasts have had a really big impact on my business. So I've already shared that people who discover me from a podcast they trust and then opt in for my private podcast, they sign up to work with me 3 times more quickly than people who find me from social media. So that creates this really consistent flow of client inquiries, even though I've got a small audience. The other big shift they've created for me is that my sales call close rate is about 95%. So by the time people come on the call, they typically just have small questions about the process. They already know it's a good fit for them. They already know I'm the person they want to work with. So it makes sales calls so collaborative. And we start creating some strategy together instead of it being a more traditional sales call.
Some seriously smart promo and positioning ideas there with some things to avoid, right? Now let's hear how they're planning to evolve and expand their private podcast strategies even further.
Play around with it. Don't let those never-ending what ifs stop you and keep you stuck. Just like you heard me say at the beginning, I've used private podcasts in a number of ways to launch services and programs. And sometimes it's made sense to use the same funnel again, the same exact private podcast. And other times I just felt pulled to try something different. Also, don't sleep on it. You certainly can set it and forget it with a private podcast, but don't not promote the show or feel like you can't add another episode. You totally 1,000,000% absolutely can. And like I've talked about, that's one of the best things about private podcasts is that they can grow and evolve with you and your business and your offers. So let this be a fun thing. Have fun. Let your brain dream up some creative ideas. Try some things, test some things, and just let the chips fall where they may, but have fun with it and play around and let yourself experiment and be creative.
My intention is to continue to use private podcasts in as many ways as possible. It's just something I'm really comfortable with. It's something that has worked really well in my business. It's also how my clients love to consume content. And so it just makes sense on so many different levels. I mentioned I am currently in the process of creating a brand new series, which I'm super excited about. It's going to be amazing. And we'll be using that to really build awareness and be building my email list even more. So really looking forward to that. Private podcast is something that I have been offering for a long time inside of my masterminds as well. So always giving clients access to the group calls, all of the recordings, trainings, everything is accessible. We have a private feed for all of that. I also have some really creative, kind of fun ideas that I have in mind as well, even from an onboarding perspective. So once a client joins our programs, and then also just as a nurturing piece. So even once people have joined the list, as an ongoing kind of nurture sequence that would be above and beyond even my public podcast feed, I have some ideas on how to incorporate some private podcasts there as well. So I think that it's like so versatile, and I think you can use it in so many different ways, and it's so effective. So just highly, highly, highly recommend finding ways to incorporate it into your strategy.
I love private podcasts. And one of the things that I did last year that I really loved was for my live event, I created a private podcast of all the speakers. And I want to do that going forward more often. Now, I don't know when my next live event will be, but I am planning some virtual live events that I think will be so cool to have a private podcast, like an exclusive private podcast to go along with the event that's over and above what the event materials are. I'm thinking bonus episodes, bonus interviews, bonus content, like things that we can really over deliver to that group of people. I also think having private podcast feed for every course, this is something that I really worked hard on last year. So every single one of my courses, nearly every one has a private podcast. It depends on the nature of the course. Some of them are a little more technical, but almost every single one of my products has a private podcast to go with it. Because again, my people are busy and I want to give them multiple ways to consume that content. And then I also love the idea of doing like a custom, not coaching, but like column advice almost for my private podcast listeners, where they could submit questions and I answer them for everyone. And so those are some of the things I'm thinking about with private podcasts. I, of course, use Hello Audio. I have the unlimited private podcast membership. And so for me, I'm like, all right, everything's a private podcast. Here we go. Come on. So even, every year, for instance, I do a LinkedIn challenge. I've never had the replays is a private podcast. And so I'm even thinking about some of those things, like how can I make this even more accessible for folks?
That was fun, right? I hope this gave you a bunch of ideas for how you can use private podcasts to grow a list of engaged, ready-to-buy subscribers. If you want to hear more from today's guests, their full solo episodes are linked for you in the show notes. And if you create or update your own lead magnet after listening to this, please let us know. We'd love to hear how you're using it and how it's getting along. Remember, this was part of our Roundup series, so be sure to catch up all the episodes if you haven't yet to get inspired by all the creative ways you can put private podcast feeds to work in your business. Thanks for listening, and we'll see you in the next one.